I had big plans, but I was banned from further competition. The punchline to that story is that I was at Carl Barks. Well, there's two punchlines. One, even I started thinking that was apocryphal. That didn't really happen. And one time I was telling that story, and Walt Simonson was sitting near me, and I said, "So I read this Donald Duck comic book," and he said, "No, it was Uncle Scrooge." And I said, "What?" He said, "Uncle Scrooge sends Donald and the nephews to Africa." And as soon as he said Africa, we said the rest in unison. To get the secret recipe for crocodile bouillabaisse, you know? And so it really must have happened, because I couldn't have made it up. And then when I was at Carl Barks' 90th birthday party thrown by Steve Jeffy, and I got to meet Carl Barks, and I told him that story. He was highly amused. He says, "Well, I don't remember that story in detail as a young man, but I'm glad you enjoyed it." So, life's little victories. Anyway, any questions or anything, or any particular funny stories you request? 12 years old, and they're not going to give you a job at the factory. And I was trying to think of ways I could help, and I realized Stan Lee used to put credits in the comics, written by Stan Lee, drawn by so-and-so. And it occurred to me, these people don't do this for free. They must get paid. You know, I thought, maybe I can do that. So I wrote some stories and sent them into DC, and the editor, after the first one, he said, sent me a letter and said, these are good, maybe you have a future doing this, send me another one. So I sent him 3, and then he called me up, he said, "We want to hire you, and to be a regular writer for us, and we'll start giving you assignments. Your first assignment is Supergirl, 12 pages, next Friday." Okay. So I started working my way through high school, and then he found out how old I was, and I had to put my mother on the phone, and because he thought I was a college student, and you know, but he said, "I don't care how old you are, I'm going to treat you just like I treat everybody else." I didn't know that meant he was going to scream at me all the time, you know, and call me a moron, you know, "What's this supposed to be? How come you can't spell?" And I'm 14, but at any rate, you know, I started the first stuff when I was 13, and I got hired technically, I guess, when I was 14, and you know, I kept doing it. So here I am all these years later. You know? But that's the story. It was you know, I mean, it was I wouldn't change it for anything, but it wasn't easy. Sir,
quick question.
Oh, here's next. You're next.
It's just a follow-up to that. So you're 14. Were you sending stories then, or did you go to New York?
I lived 400 miles away. Okay, so it was all over the phone.
Wow.
He didn't know what I looked like or anything. And apparently my voice was deep enough, so he thought I was like older than I was. And yeah, so he didn't know. And the time he asked me, it was like he said, "I want you to fly up to New York, and put you up in a hotel for a week. I want you to come to the office every day. We're going to teach you some stuff." And I just turned 14. I'm thinking, how's that going to go? You know, and so I hesitated, and then he asked me, "How old are you?" And I said, "Well, I just turned 14. And he said, "Put your mother on the phone." And she was on board. It was fun. You know, I had to take her with me on my first business trip, which is a little uncool. You know, taking your mother on a business trip is very weird. But it was good. And they took us to a Broadway play, and they took us out to dinner, and it was fun. Good. Couldn't believe it was happening. It was like magical, you know.
We have another question.
So, when you're doing a book, do you do an outline like you're doing a novel or a short story, but then you have to break it down into the actions? I mean, how does that work?
How do I do a story? Do I do an outline first or whatever? Okay, the way I did it at first was, you know, I would think up the story. I didn't write anything down. I just had it in my head. And once I thought I had it well organized in my head, I would take a piece of paper and I would draw 22 rectangles on it. And I would try to figure out what would go on each page. And sometimes I'd break the pages into panels, and this is where he'll find out about the monster, and this is, you know. And just the briefest little notes or a little stick figure to remind me of what I planned for that. Then I'd start going and drawing and writing the book. And then sometimes I'd realize I'm running a little long figure out ways to compress, or I'd say, oh, I have some room, and I'd make the fight scene bigger, that kind of stuff. But that's how I did it at first. And in those days, I would actually draw each panel the best I could, because I didn't know what a script looked like. I didn't know there was a script. And so I just made what I sent look as much like a comic book as possible. And then when I found out what a script looked like, I asked the editor, I said, you want me to start doing it this way? And he said, no, people love the layouts. The artists like those layouts. He said, you keep doing it that way. All right. So I did it that way. And I would make a layout. I'd write word balloons for the characters and so forth. And they liked it. And it was really great. I look back on it now, and I'm thinking, I didn't think of this at the time, but I had all these Hall of Fame Grandmaster artists, and they're respecting the kids' layouts. They're doing it what I ask them to do, and then when I make a really stupid mistake, they'd fix it, but then they tell me why. And so I learned, but it's really impressive that like Wally Wood followed my layouts. Gil Kane followed my layouts, and so I thought, wow, that's really something, And I later, I was editor-in-chief of Marvel, and they were working for me, so it was kind of odd, Yeah, well, what happened was I worked for this guy, Mort Weisinger, at DC, and he was like their head editor. They didn't call him editor-in-chief, but he was the guy who was the head of editorial. And he was a vice president, it's a big shot. And so when I started working for him, I started going on these trips. The first trip I had to take my mother with me. Every trip thereafter, when I was 14, 15, 16, and 17, and before I was 18, I think I left. But no, after I was 18. All right, so the rest of the time I worked there, I would go to New York on my own. I lived in Pittsburgh. It was 400 miles away, Go to the airport, get a plane, take the bus into New York, check into a hotel, go to the office every day. And the funny thing is, no one ever batted an eye. I mean, it was, it's a 14-year-old kid, that's fine. These days, they'd arrest the parents. Seriously. In those days, nobody thought anything unusual about it. All right, so when I was in the office on these visits, this editor I worked for, Mort Weisinger, he was more than just an editor. He really was a big factor in things like getting Batman on TV, getting Superman on Broadway, getting Superman on television. He had a lot to do with that kind of stuff. I mean, he really ran the whole business. And so when I went there, a lot of times, not only would we talk about stories and art, but he'd sit me down with like Jack Adler to learn about production and printing production. And he talked to me about distribution and merchandising and licensing and all this stuff. And also the business of the business. Like the economics of the business to a certain extent. And I used to wonder, why is he telling me this? But you didn't ask him questions. He was kind of a mean guy, and your response was yes, sir. That's it. So anyway, I always wondered why he did that. And years later, his assistant told me, he said he was training you to have a job like his. I thought, who, me, the moron? What? But, because the guy would call and scream at me all the time about, why can't you spell, and why are you so stupid? Well, why was he training me? Well, I guess because, A, his MO was that way with everybody. He would always yell at everybody so they wouldn't ask for a raise, and B, I think he saw some potential in me that he thought maybe I could, grow up and do stuff like that. So it didn't work out that I ended up at DC, but I was hired by Marvel. Marv Wolfman hired me to be what they called associate editor. It's the editor. I don't know why they called it associate editor, but I was like the number 2 man at Marvel. It was Marv and then me, and then the editorial people. And I'd always wanted to try that, because I'd seen how to do it at DC, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. So I started doing editorial work, and after 2 years I was hired as editor-in-chief, because it was like a revolving door for editor-in-chief. Roy Thomas was the first one, and he lasted 2.5 years. When he was there, Stan was still involved with the comics, and so it was him and Stan. Then with Len Wein came next, and he was there for 8 months. Marv Wolfman was there for exactly a year. Then they had Jared Conway, who was there for 3 weeks. Couldn't take it. And then they had Archie Goodwin for 19 months. And Archie was good calming influence, you know, but it got to him too. And finally they had run out of live bodies. And remember, I've been passed over 3 times. Okay, I was the heir apparent of number 2. I was passed over 3 times. And I thought, well, that's just the way it's going to be. I'm going to be Mr. Spock forever, you know. But then they gave me my chance, and I was there for 10 years. So, but the thing is, all right, so now I'm editor-in-chief. All that stuff that Mort taught me came back. And it's really nice to be able to call the printer and use the right technical terms, use the right words. And it's nice to walk in the production department and talk to them about what you want done with a page and use the correct technical terms. Because, you know, the other guys, they go in there and say, you know, can you make this bigger, you know? And yes, we can make it bigger. You know, I'd say, shoot me a photostat at 115%, you know, oh, sure. You know, so you know it was useful, and then also because I knew something about the business of the business, I was able to like sit in the business meetings upstairs because I ran the comics. I was well, not right away, but eventually in a short time I was the vice president and in charge, vice president, editor-in-chief, and I had to go to these meetings with the business types upstairs who'd never opened a comic book in their life. But and so it was nice to be able to read a balance sheet and speak the financial talk with them, or at least have a clue what they were talking about. So that came in handy. And also, I didn't mention it, but Mort sat me down to like touch on a woodland coloring with George Klein, taught me some inking stuff that he needs to know. So I felt like comfortable then talking to my inkers and colorists at Marvel. You know, if a guy who'd never colored was telling him something, you know, again, you might use the wrong words or you might not know what you're talking about. But I've been taught by the best. And so, you know, and I paid attention to every word they said. You know, these guys knew what they were doing. I paid attention. So that was good, you know, and so I became the first editor-in-chief to last very long. And I think a lot of that was because, you know, I mean, Archie Goodwin was maybe one of the smartest people you'd ever want to meet. Roy Thomas, super smart. I mean, these guys could have done that if they wanted, but they were creative guys, and their eyes would glaze over and they talked to accountants and lawyers and licensing people. They weren't interested, you know. And me, that wasn't my favorite thing, but it was very good to know how to deal with those people. My superpower was I had more patience dealing with the upstairs idiots than the previous guys. And I was able to get a lot of things done because if you give it to them in their terms, then you can get things done. In other words, the way to get something done is say, this is how we'll make money on it. Okay? And at one time, Chris Claremont went to a convention, I don't know where, someplace he didn't like, and he comes dragging into the office on Monday morning, and the Avengers guys come bouncing in because they just spent the whole weekend at West Palm Beach. And so Claremont comes over and says, how come they get to go to West Palm Beach and I had to go to Mudville, you know? And I said, Chris, people ask for guests. Steve Saffel fields all the requests. He tells you if you're requested, and you choose what you want. You pick that town, you know. I said, why did you do that? You know, he said, well, my book sells the best, and I should get to go to the best conventions. I said, where do you want to go, Turkey? He said, Paris. I said, you got it. He said, you can't do that. I said, watch me. And I went upstairs, talked to the licensing people. We called up our French licensees. We said if we sent the X-Men team there for a promotional visit, you know, could you do, you think you'd sell more? Could you do extra publishing? Could you get them on TV or something? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So they said, oh, they said give them all kinds of publicity. You know, television. They'd be treated like royalty, and they publish a special book, and they guaranteed us that the sales would go up. So anyway, I walked out of there with $30,000 of guaranteed money from the Europeans, and just for fun, I went to the president. I reported to the president, and he was the only guy who could overrule me. And so partly to check and just also for fun. I went into his office. I said, I got a problem. I said, the French want the X-Men guys to come over there, but it's going to cost $11,000. He said, well, that's a lot. I said, yeah, but I've got $30,000 in guarantees from the French publishers. He said, well, what are you bothering me for, clown? Go do it. So I said, all right, well, I think I'll go do that. So I was told Claremont, pack your bags for Paris, pal. And then when he goes to Paris, I get this screaming phone call. Spanish publisher, you're sending him to Europe and you're not sending him here? And then the other publishers start calling me, and I said, next time. He ended up going to Barcelona, and then my own company, in the Marvel UK, they called me up screaming, and so he ended up going to UK. And then after that, he was committed at the ABA in San Francisco, and I was there too. And so he comes dragging into the hotel just as a bunch of us are leaving for dinner. He says, well, can I come? I said, sure, we'll wait. So he drops his bags and he comes down and he goes to dinner with us. And I'm telling you, he was so exhausted, he was doing that face down in the mashed potatoes thing. Like this for the whole dinner. I don't think he remembers it at all. It was pretty funny though. But I said, yeah, you want to try for something else now? You want to try for Hong Kong? Yeah. Anyway, long story, sorry.
I got an odd story. I heard you're one of the people, but I wanted you to tell me which one you were. Like, the offices at Marvel supposed to be a long hallway with the little offices on the side. They said the boss was walking through the middle of the hallway and there was two people, like one tackling the other one, coming from one room all the way over into the other one. Which one were you? Were you the boss or was you the tackler?
No. All right, let me tell you that story. This is a good one. Now, this is at the old Marvel, before the new Marvel. And the old Marvel was in 575 Madison, and it was not a big space, and it was kind of cluttered and a bunch of rabbit warrens and stuff. So anyway, after work, you were all exhausted, and we just kind of hang around for a while, maybe go out to the Brew Burger and get something to eat or whatever. And what happened was the DC guys would all come over to Marvel after work, like at 5:15, 5:30. All the DC guys come over to Marvel to hang out, and we're hanging out and talking comics and doing normal stuff. And finally, it occurred to me to ask somebody, and I said, why is it that DC's, somebody said DC doesn't allow freelancers after 5 o'clock. And I said, why is that? And so Len Wein pipes up. He says, oh, that's my fault. I said, what happened? He said, well, we were there after work one night. Neil Adams and I started wrestling. He said, and we tumbled into one of the walls of a cubicle and broke it. And then that's why they don't, every guy understands this. They're just wrestling for fun. They were just, clowning around, right? Women go, why were you wrestling? But guys understand. Trust me, girls, this is normal, sort of ish. So anyway, they were fooling around. They broke something, and then so DC banned freelancers from the office forever after that. So they'd all come over to Marvel. So anyway, Len is telling us this story, and then before you know it, somehow that segues into wrist wrestling, right? And so I was wrestling with Len, and he's a powerful guy. He was a powerful guy in those days, and he was also left-handed. And so left-handed, he beat me. Right-handed, I put him down. And so he sort of reenacts what happened at DC. We stand up, and he dives on me, he tackles me, right? I'm like, what? Well, he picked the wrong turkey because I'm a damn good wrestler. and so I pushed him off a little bit, and I kind of got one arm under his arm, and I think, oh, this is good. And I picked him up. I turned him upside down, and I'm holding him upside down, All right, at the same time, Stan is walking down the hall, and Stan walks fast, And so he's zooming down the hall. Well, when I picked Len up, his legs swung out and he struck Roger Stern, sending him reeling backwards, out the editorial room door, across the hallway where he slammed into the wall, left a Roger Stern-shaped dent in the wall, and narrowly missing Stan. Boom! So Stan, like, Roger crashes into the wall, Stan goes, what? And then the next step puts him in front of the door, and he sees me holding Len upside down, and he just keeps going. He just keeps going. And as he rounded the corner to go out the door, he yelled back, "Stay alive, men!" That's a quote. Whereupon I dropped Len on his head, and that's why he was the way he was. But we were laughing our tails off. I didn't really drop him. We were laughing our tails off about that, but it was pretty funny. So just so you know, I was up at Ithaca once, and that's where Roger lives, Ithaca. And somehow that story comes up. And so Roger and I reenacted it. And we had volunteers in the audience, and we reenacted it. And Roger will certify that I tell the story correctly. Not only that, I was at the World Science Fiction Convention when it was in Philadelphia. And Len was there. And then he ran into me, we're talking, having a good time, and then I had to go to a panel. And he said, oh, I'll see you later. I said, why don't you come with us? You know, you come on up with us, Len. You know, we're just talking, you know, ordinary stuff. So he comes up on the panel, and somehow that story comes up. And so Len and I acted it out, and we agreed on the details. So, except the dropping on the head, I made that. You know, that really happened. That's the kind of craziness that went on. There was a lot more crazy, and it wasn't just me. It wasn't just me. There were a lot of crazy stuff going on. There were a lot of guys. I mean, you know, you're working 16-hour days, 14-hour days. Sometimes you just got to do something stupid, you know, just to blow off steam or something.
Any other questions? Okay.
Who is your favorite superhero?
Well, my favorite growing up was Spider-Man, because I kind of related to him. He had money troubles, you know. And also, he was a science student. I was a big science student. In 4 years of high school, it took 6 years of science. Biology 1 and 2, chemistry 1 and 2, and physics 1 and 2. I took every math course they offered, right up to calculus, probability, and statistics. And you know, I thought I was going to be a scientist. This comic book thing was just making money. I never thought I was going to do it as a career. I enjoyed it. I loved it. But you know, I was that 50s generation where you're supposed to grow up and be a scientist and, you know, beat them Russians to the moon and stuff. You know, well, we already beat the Russians to the moon, and you know, and I was having a great deal of fun with the comics, so I just stuck with the comics.
One right here first.
So, two-part question for you. The first one, being from Pittsburgh, are you a Steelers fan?
Yes.
And so you're responsible for a lot of really amazing things in the industry. One of the biggest things being the fact of the different research that
Oh yes. Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about like what spurred that? What made you realize that these changes needed to be made?
Well, I was on the other side of the table. Marvel Comics had a tremendous rise in the 60s, at the same time that DC was falling. But then when Stan more or less got out of it in the 70s, all comics started to fall, even Marvel's. And sales were terrible. And in those days, if you were an artist, writer, whatever, all you got was your page rate. Like you 10 pages times whatever it is, that's what you get. No rights, no benefits, no royalties, no nothing. All right? And and also because the sales were going down, the page rates didn't rise. The page rates stayed the same, or they were pretty low. And so more and more people, anybody who could get any other work would leave comics, you know, and do something else. So we kept losing. You get a great guy like Bernie Wrightson, and pretty soon he's gone because you can get other work. You get other people like that, and even Steve Englehart left to go write novels for a while and stuff. So it was a pretty rotten situation. And when the year I took over in 1978, that's the situation I inherited. And things were really terrible that year. Warren Publications went bankrupt. They went out of business. Charlton went out of business. Harvey stopped publishing. Archie went all reprint, no news stuff. And on one day in June, DC Comics canceled 40% of their titles. That's how bad things were. Marvel was just barely hanging on, and it was going down. And so this is what I walk into, and the president of the company told me, you're going to preside over the death of Marvel Comics, and I'm going to get us into other businesses, animation and children's books. And I said, you're wrong. We can turn this around, and we will. So he said, do whatever you want. Just try not to lose money. Do whatever you want is a pretty free hand, you know. So I made 2 deals. I said, if I beat my projections, can I use that extra money to make things better? You're not going to beat your projections. Go ahead. And I said, if I save money, can I use that money? Yes. So right away, I knew all the places you could save money. We were late. Marvel was so late that we had books that hadn't left the house yet that were supposed to be published 4 months earlier. They're 6 months late. It's books that are 6 months late. And that we had other books that were just barely making it. And the thing is, or late my first month, January 1978, we were supposed to publish 45 color comics. We published 26. That only 26 made it. I mean, that's bad, you know? And the thing is, when books are late, you've already reserved time at the separator and the printer, so you pay for that time anyway. And there's things like you have to do expedited shipping. In those days, no FedEx. You know, you're shipping, the plates, the printing plates were made of zinc, and they were made in Connecticut. You want to ship zinc plates express to Sparta, Illinois? That costs a bunch of money. And so anyway, it just was, that was a disaster. And I said, I got to fix that. And we did. It took me a year. At the end of that year, I got a letter from the guy who ran World Color Press, the printer. His name was Bob Craig. And the letter said, congratulations, for the first time in its history since 1939, Marvel Comics is on time. So that saved a fortune, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I kept doing every other thing I could think of to try to save money. We used to color on photostats, if you remember what photostats are. And then the fully loaded cost of a photostat is about $2 a page. Think how many pages Marvel colored a year at $2 a page. Then I found that we got this new copying machine that changed sizes. And I thought, huh. And so I tested it. I shrunk a page down to coloring size, and I went home and had a coloring kit, so I colored it. Looked good. It was easy. It was easier than a stat because the color sticks better. So I told all the colorists, all right, from now on we're coloring on paper because it cost me $2 for a photostat, and an intern can stand at the copier and make copies for 2 cents a copy. Okay? Everybody's up in arms. The colorists hated it because if you change anything, everybody hates it. They didn't like it, they hated it, it's terrible, it's going to destroy everything. 2 weeks later, they're loving it. You know, the stat guys were losing their minds. They were all going to get laid off. Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. I said, no, you're not. I'm going to bring everything in-house that we send out of house, and you'll have more work than you ever had before. And they did. And so they're all happy. And so I saved tens of thousands of dollars doing that, and lots of other stuff like that, you know. And also I found out that there was a lot of corruption. There were people embezzling, double vouchering, just outright stealing. And also all kinds of other unprofessional behavior. Well, I cleaned it up, you know, and so we saved money that was formerly being stolen. And so I had more money. And then I was able to, the first thing I did was I doubled the rates, I doubled them again, and I kept increasing them thereafter to get people up to a living wage. I had one artist who was getting $35 a page for a complete page, pencil and ink, $35. I mean, that's not a lot. It takes you like a couple days to do that. So I got that fixed, and then we started introducing programs. We introduced life insurance for freelancers. 3 jobs a year, you qualify for life insurance. Health insurance, really good health insurance, the same as the company people had, the same as the employees had. 3 jobs a year, you qualify. We started, for a while I did a continuity bonus. So you do so many issues in a row, you get a bonus. try to keep people in the same book. I said, look, it's work for hire. You can't expect people to provide any materials if it's work for hire. That's like asking workers to bring the leather to the shoe factory and claiming you own the shoes. You know, no, you have to pay for all materials. So we paid for all art supplies, you know, pencils, erasers, pens, ink, whatever. And if you ever tried to buy a Winsor Newton brush, you better bring a couple $100 with you. Postage. I said, if you send something in Marvel, we'll pay you postage. You know, if I ask you if you're on the phone with Marvel, in those days you had itemized phone bills. I said, I'll pay for all the calls to Marvel. If you are traveling to see Marvel and I ask you to come to see Marvel, I'll pay your transportation. I'll put you up in a hotel. And so we did all that. We made it nice. And then the crowning jewel was they finally got the royalty program done. And so all of a sudden these guys are getting royalties based on the sales of the book. They're getting really well paid up front. And then if the book sells over 100,000, they get a check. That's the royalty pool started at 4%, and it was a sliding scale. The more your book sells, the higher your royalty goes. And it went all the way up to 8%. And then I added 2 more percent, one for the editor and one if you created the book. And the creating the book part stuck with you even if you weren't doing it anymore. So John Byrne kept getting checks for Alpha Flight long after he quit Alpha Flight and anything else. I quit Marvel. He still got the checks. So it was really good. And I remember one time, and it's a royalty. See, the thing is, 100,000 sounds like a lot of copies these days. Every single Marvel comic sold more than 100,000. All right. DC, they had 3 titles that sold more than 100,000, barely. And but you know, so when we introduced the royalty program, that was taking a risk because if sales didn't go up, we'd be doling out money and losing. You know, we'd be losing that money. But sales did go up. I knew they would, and then I convinced the board of directors they'd go up. And so their estimate was it was going to take $750,000 off the bottom line if sales didn't go up. Well, it did take some money out of our revenues. It took $2 million the first year, but they were happy because that meant the books were selling like crazy. You know, if our royalties are paying her $2 million, then I think how much Marvel was making. You know, and I remember one time with John Byrne, I happened to be upstairs for something. All the executives are upstairs. The downstairs, that was the jungle where all those dangerous, you know, creative creatures live. So upstairs, I was up there for some reason, and the assistant to the vice president of finance says to me, he said, I got a royalty check here for John Byrne. I hear he's in the office. I said, yeah, give it to me. I'll hand it to him. I took it downstairs, and I said, John, here's a royalty check for one issue of one comic for which you've already been very well paid, $30,000. 30 grand. One issue of one comic. And that wasn't the biggest one he ever got. Okay? And then Claremont's doing well, the Avengers guy, everybody's doing well. Even the guys on the lower books. So it's nice to get a check for $500 every month from doing your whatever Kung Fu or something. So the guys were all doing really good, doing really well, and that was great stuff for a long time. Guess what? Word spreads. You can make money at Marvel, and so guys start showing up. Guys who left come back. Englehart came back. Roy came back because he went to DC. He got mad at me, went to DC. He wasn't doing well there. Came back. Wrightson came back. Starlin came back. Kaluta came back. I mean, you know, all of a sudden we were getting all these great artists, and things was really starting to go well. And it went. That's the trouble. When it went well, the owners decided to sell the company, and then everything went to hell.
Okay, we have another question here.
Who did they sell it to? That wasn't my question, but you said they sold the company. Who did they sell it to?
Okay, Marvel was part of a conglomerate called Cadence. I don't know if you guys remember conglomerates like Litton Industries, big companies buying up little companies that aren't unrelated. So it was owned by something called Cadence Industries, and Cadence was failing disastrously. Only Marvel was doing well. So they were cleaning it up, selling off all these little companies. And here is Marvel, it's the crown jewel. We're making all the money. And the comics anyway. The other areas weren't doing so well. But so we're making all the money. And so that was the crown jewel. And I think that, like I said, none of these guys had ever opened a comic book. know what comics were. They didn't care. It looked like just a blip to them. They thought, oh, this is a fad. It's hula hoops. We better get out now. So they decided to sell Marvel. They shopped it around to a whole bunch of people. They finally sold it to a company called New World Pictures. And when New World Pictures bought Marvel, they changed their name to New World Entertainment. Not to be confused with New Line Cinema. This is New World Pictures. And so now they were New World Entertainment. And that was a company financed. There's another blast from the past, financial folks. It was financed by junk bonds, like the Michael Milken type of junk bonds, super high interest, you know. And so they bought it, and Marvel, I was out of there. They got rid of me. I was, when they were destroying what we built, I made them fire me, and I was happy to go, and I started Valiant. But anyway, the thing is that New World bought the company, and none of the other little companies they bought were doing any, or they were all failing. So Marvel went from one failing conglomerate to another failing conglomerate, and so they finally had to sell it too. I actually put it in a bid. I bid $81 million for Marvel. I had Chase North America as my lending partner, and Shankman Capital as my equity partner, and I had two other operating partners. And we bid $81 million. Ronald O. Perlman bid 82.5. So, and he was part of the selling company, so we weren't even allowed to try to bid back. So he took it over for a while, and he made a lot of money doing what they call churning the stock. But eventually, his little flimsy scam fell through, and he had to sell it. He was trying to sell it, but he went bankrupt first. And so the bondholders took over the company, FarleyCon's company, and then they were given Chapter 7, and they recovered. I actually tried to buy it again, and again, it was just impossible to buy. It was going to be over $1 billion, and I have a high school education, and not a lot of people are going to lend me $1 billion. But I got some Cap City ABC's execs who run units for Cap City's ABC that were over $1 billion. And with them, my deal with them is you do the media, I'll do everything else. And we tried to make a bid, but there were too many what you call contingent liabilities. Everybody's suing everybody, you know. And so it couldn't be done. But they got them chapter 7, they were allowed to recover, and that's when the movies started. And that's when the movies took off, I should say, and they started making some serious money. So they're still making serious money from the movies. The comics are losing tens of millions. But anyway, sorry. So that's the ownership trail of Marvel.
So you got a sweatshop downstairs where you guys were working. And the upper echelon were probably having big fat paychecks every month, and just living high off of what you all did.
Yeah, when I came in, it was a sweatshop. And I turned it around, and we started making money. And for a little while, I was a fair-haired boy. I could get away, you know, because we were making all the money. And you know, and the upstairs people were happy because they made even more money. You know, but then they stupidly tried to sell it. I remember telling one of these, it was essentially the board of directors that took the company private. Cadence Management Incorporated, the board of directors. And I remember talking to them one time, a couple of them. I said, you people are so wrong. I said, you're stupid. Let us build it. We're going to build you $1 billion company. You know, like let it happen. You know, we'll do well. You'll do better. You know, why are you doing this? But they just thought it must be a fad or something because they didn't sell for so long, and all of a sudden they sell. It must be just a blip. You know, no, we built it. But when I say we advisedly, I got the best people on earth and made a great team. And they, you know, Larry Hama, Archie Goodman, Louise Simonson. If you can't win with those guys, forget it. But anyway, they wouldn't listen. And P.S. Galton's dream of having a book publishing company and an animation studio, between them they were losing $10 million a year. They were disasters. The rest of the board members called them Galton's Folly. You know, but fortunately we were making enough money not only for him to get those things, but to sustain the losses that they were disasters. So we were the only thing that was going right. Was us, me and Walton, Izzy, and Archie, and what we built. That was doing well, and then it all went to hell. So, I ended up out of there, and I was happy to be out of there because the big fat cats had really taken over, and it just wasn't fun anymore.
Jim, we got a couple more questions here.
I'm Mr. Shooter. My name's Chance Bartels, Atlanta, Georgia. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I remember the Marvel tryout book. I loved that, and I think Mark Bagley won that contest.
That's true.
And I had sent in, you'll find this interesting, a drawing of a character I called Happy. He's like a demented happy face. He can drive people insane.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Mark Gruenwald's no longer with us, God rest his soul, since '96. But they came up with the character Madcap, based on my design, my colors, and all that stuff.
Really?
Swear to goodness. And no accusation, I just thought you'd find it interesting. It was a long time ago, I was 13 years old.
If I had known about that, I would have done something. And keep in mind, there could be something a little coincidental there, but I don't doubt that it was yours. Because that happens. Sometimes even one time, there's a character called Eternal Warrior, and we searched it, seemed fine. We published it with Eternal Warrior, and a few months later, this guy walks into my office. He says, "I showed you a character called Eternal Warrior like last year," and I forgot about it entirely. So we made it like a settlement with him, and that's what Marvel should have done with you, but I wasn't there
Well,
then.
no, my parents were like, you should be flattered. Imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery, and I was just 13, and I was like, now when the movies are saying he's going to be in Deadpool, it's like, man,
that's really wrong.
Disney, that's a Disney thing now.
That's really wrong. And they should have. If it happened by accident, or even if somebody did it on purpose and they found out about it, they should have set that right. And I would have tried to, just like we did with Eternal Warrior. I just blanked on it, and I thought, hey, that's a good name, and we did the trademark search, and it wasn't trademarked.
The final thing, they put a hat on him. They did change a couple things, like it was the same color as Demented Happy Face, who was yellow and purple.
Yeah,
but
cool.
I submitted it like the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, where it's like a full-page drawing with synopsis.
Right.
And the only thing that changed, they put a hat on him, and then when he was first introduced in Captain America 307, he had a gun that would drive people insane, and then when he came back 2 issues later, there's a panel where it's like, oh, your gun doesn't work. He goes, oh, I don't need the gun. I can stare at you and make you go insane.
Which is that's your power, yeah. Okay, well, I didn't know about that. It might have not happened when I was.
Not an accusation.
Well, it might not have happened when I was there. If I did know about it, I would have fixed it. I don't know who did that. Do you know the editor?
Well, Mark Gruenwald was credited as creating, and Neary, who's still alive, drew that issue, Captain America 307, and then Matt came back in 309. But they changed the name from Happy, a demented happy people insane with a stare, to Madcap, and they put a hat on him. That was really the only difference.
That's pretty cheesy. It's hard for me to believe Mark did that. It could have been somebody working for him did it, and he helped or something. I don't know. But like I said, I either wasn't there or was entirely unaware of it. And they should have. That's terrible. That's really bad. I mean, it does happen. I tell you something. In the early days of comics, you're right. People were flattered, and nobody cared. Mort Weisinger used to have a little section of his letter page called "Bits of Legionnaire Business," and people would write in suggestions for new Legion of Superheroes characters. And Mort would say, "Well, if you ever see one you like, we'll make the character." So, for instance, Shadowlass, that was suggested. And Mort said, you have one of these guys you want to use? I said, well, Shadowlass sounds like fun, And there was other ones too, and no one thought anything of it, in those days. I don't know why, but Gruenwald should have known better, or if he did that deliberately, that was not right. But Mark, it's hard for me to believe. Mark is such a good guy, and he was an honorable fellow. I don't understand that entirely, but I believe him. And I certainly would have looked into it, and we certainly would have done something about it. I am really astonished that they didn't look into it. You brought it up to them, right?
Well, there was an ad where you guys had asked for submissions. You're like, we had such an overwhelming response to the Marvel Triumph book, and we're getting some great ideas. And it was like promised you'll get benefits of a Marvel writer and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's just, well, no, I know that. The thing is, we did the tryout book, which was a really good idea because like you get all these samples and stuff. How do you prove you're a good inker unless you have professional pencils to work with? Like, how do you prove you're Joe Montana unless you have Jerry Rice? You know, so I created that book, which showed you what the comic book should look like when it's finished, and we peeled away the layers. Here it is uncolored. Here's pages uncolored. It was all one story, by the way. Here are the finished pages were the beginning of the story. The pages you had to color were the next couple pages, and then there were pages that were not inked yet, but they were lettered. You could ink those pages. And then pages that had to be lettered. And with each thing, we gave you what you needed. Here's the script. Here's what tools you use. Explain how to use the tools. And then there was, the pages to pencil, and then and we gave glorious blank paper for the pages to pencil, and it was all printed on Marvel artboard, the same paper. And the end of it was that the story being told in that book ended at kind of a cliffhanger, and the last pages finished the story. So everybody could try whatever they wanted. A great idea, and it sold incredibly well. And so then they wanted to do it again, and I said, can't do the same thing. But we had this publisher, Mike Hobson. I didn't report to him, but we both reported to the president. We worked collegially pretty well. He said, why don't we make it into a contest? So then we came up with the contest, and we sold another ton of these things. But I think it was a valuable thing. It was a worthwhile thing. I'm sorry about what happened to you. P.S. Bagley, Mark Bagley, was the winner of the tryout contest as penciler, and so he became Mark Bagley. I met today the winner who was the inking winner. He's here. And I ran into another guy who was the writing winner. I ran into a restaurant. I went to a restaurant with my girlfriend, and I was, oh, right this way, Mr. Shooter. How do you know my name? And I had a reservation, but I mean, like, as soon as he sees me, he knows, and he takes a bottle of champagne for free, and I'm like, what's going on here, you know? And it turned out that he was the guy that run the writing contest, but he had inherited this restaurant thing from his parents, so he became a restaurateur instead. So, I mean, like, somebody lettered it, somebody colored it. I'm not sure what happened to them, but it was a good thing, and we did live up to our obligations, except with you, apparently. I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
My friend is more mad than I am.
Well, he should be, and you should be more mad.
Jim, we've got to move on. We've got time for one more question, and then we've got to get you back to your table.
One more question?
One.
What's your worst experience, Thomas, and what's your best? Buying and valuing
Yeah, I guess both at Marvel and at the other companies, there were good things, and it was really good times. Marvel, when it was being sold, was a bad thing. Valiant, we started out on a shoestring. My partner starts dating the banker, and then between them, they owned more stock than I did, so they controlled the board. The reason we did Nintendo Comics is because he was a lawyer and he represented Nintendo for media and entertainment. So he made a deal with himself across the tables, on both sides of the table. And all of a sudden, the board approves it because it's his wife, by that point. And so I'm doing Nintendo Comics. And the thing is, I didn't want to do Nintendo Comics, but I really, if I quit, then J.J. Jackson and Don Perlin and all the other people who come to work for me, they would have been out of work, and that wouldn't have been good. And so I thought, I'm going to stick with it. We're going to try to make this work. If it works and we start bringing in some money, then I can raise money and I can buy that turkey out, because that's what he wants, money. He doesn't care about the books. So then the same thing, the World Wrestling Federation, he was their lawyer for entertainment, and so he made a deal with himself. He gets big fat fees for this, by the way. He made several $100,000 out of this, and I have to do wrestling books. I enjoy doing wrestling books. I enjoy doing Nintendo books. We did the best we could, but neither of those things were likely to succeed in this market. And then finally I got to do the superheroes, which is what I set out to do in the first place, and then we just started kicking tail and taking names. We ate 15% of Marvel's market share like that. We were quickly the third largest publisher, on our way to being the first largest publisher. And just like at Marvel, he and his wife decided to cash in and sell the company, and they basically stole it from him. And there's long story short. And so that was probably the worst experience. But I started again. That's what my mother said to me, start again. And we started Defiant, which is what aptly named Defiant, right? And I just kept going. And P.S. Without me, the deal they made with Paramount fell through, because the Paramount guy said, the creative guy's gone. It's a Pyrrhic victory, but when the Paramount people told him, forget it, we're not interested anymore, the creative guy is gone. Hey, that's good. So then shortly after that, they crashed and burned. So it was a little, sort of grim satisfaction in that. And I have my different struggles here and there with Defiant, Broadway, whatever. But I gotta tell you, and then I was freelance after that. I still am. All in all, it wasn't a bad ride. A lot of fun, a lot of great people along the way. It wasn't a bad ride at all. I think probably when Valiant really took off and we were successful, and we were at the Diamond Show, and they gave me an award, the best publisher under so many percent or something, and then a Lifetime Achievement Award, which they also gave the one to Stan at that time. That was probably a pinnacle right there. It felt like it sort of. When I left Marvel, I was the pariah of comics because they blamed everything on me. They blamed Kirby on me. They blamed Kerber on me. They blamed all this stuff that was completely out of my control on me, and they were successful at it. And also, when all the benefits were being taken away and stuff like that, they blamed that on me. And guys like Walt Simonson are saying, "How come I'm not getting my foreign royalties?" Now, if I say, "You people upstairs are screwing you, Walt," then he quits and he goes to DC, and then it's Jim Shooter's driving talent away. And so what I told him, I said, I'm working on it, I'm trying to fix this, and I had more power than I knew. If I had only understood better that I was the key man, they couldn't sell the company without me, I would have had more clout than I knew, but I didn't know it, and so they were able to get away with it, and like I said, by that time, nobody liked me, Marvel sure didn't, and the people who worked there thought that I caused all the problems. So I'm editor-in-chief of Marvel. I'm unemployed. You think somebody give me a call? Nobody. Phone never rang. It wasn't until a while later when Disney hired me as a consultant. It was the first time I got a break. But so that was pretty bad. So when we started Valiant, the books were good and we succeeded, and at Diamond, I got the standing ovation from there was like 1,000 retailers there. Made it. And then, of course, that was stolen from me. Thanks a lot. I'm sorry I keep guys so long. Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody, let's give Mr. Shooter a hand. Thank you for coming to us this year at FarleyCon. It's been an honor having you here.